Welcome everyone from the both of us to this Leading Virtual Teams workshop. It's a mini workshop actually. It's just a 1 hour setup, but the idea is really for us to use technology to have a bit of a dialogue. And so we're going to use a little bit of Mentimeter and the chat box as a way of engaging you and having more of a conversation with us. So welcome everyone. Thanks for our colleagues in TPC that sets this up for us from a technological perspective. But even more, welcome Catherine Bardwell, which is going to be my colleague working with me today in this workshop. And it's such a pleasure every time that we have the chance to work together.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay, so let us tell you a couple of things about ourselves, because I don't know how many webinars on leading virtual teams and smart working and stuff like this you might have had in the last months during the whole COVID situation. But maybe let us tell you why we're talking about this, right? Let me say a couple of things about myself first. I am the managing partner of TPC Leadership in Italy. And I think this is probably one of the reasons why I'm giving this this workshop and I'm running this conversation with you. At TPC Leadership, we have been involved in leading virtually since we started. So when COVID hit us, it was already 20 years that we were working in a virtual setup. So a big part of what we do is, of course, working with leaders across the globe, but it's also working with the colleagues across the globe, and everything happens in working in virtual teams. So what we hope to share with you is a little bit of the experience that we have matured in these 20 years. And from our point of view of people leading a global organization working virtually, but also of experts in the fields of team coaching and team facilitation and leadership, we want to share with you, of course, a couple of top tips, but I would say much more some of the key principles which can help you transfer, the skills you have in the face-to-face setup to the team, virtual team setup. I would say this is in a nutshell. Catherine, what else are you?
Well, I'd like to talk about myself very, very briefly. Thank you very much, Andrea. So I'm one of the partners in the UK for TPC Leadership. And it's a real honor to actually be with you today. So a bit of background, I come from consulting. So I worked with PwC. So that's when I first started my career as a consultant. And then, of course, I'm a professional coach. For those who know coaching, I'm under the ICF accreditation, so the International Coaching Federation. My passion is really around leadership, and this is why I'm actually delighted to be here with you and to co-host with Andrea this mini workshop on leading virtual teams. What we're trying to do today is really just to share some of our experiences of running our business virtually. And like Andrea was saying, we've actually been running our business for the last 20 years. So we are going to share some of our experiences and top tips, but we want to hear from you as well in terms of some of the benefits, but also challenges and best practice that you've actually already have put in place in your teams. So a really great welcome to this mini workshop.
Thank you, Catherine. And I think I like what you said. We also like to listen. What's your experience? Because to be entirely honest, it doesn't matter how long you've been working in this field. At some level, because of the scale it reached, thanks to the Corona situation, I think this is unprecedented for all of us. And so I think we are all starting to experience that. It's not likely that in 1 or 2 months we'll just all go back to the office, but probably we're going to spend a little bit of time in the long run transforming the way we operate, probably mixing office work and virtual work. And therefore, this topic about how we make the most out of virtual teams is going to become more and more important. It's going to be a big innovation from a socialization and a teamwork perspective, isn't it, Catherine?
Definitely, absolutely. It's a lot of creativity going on at the moment, indeed.
Yeah. So just to give us a little bit of sense of focus, so what we're going to do today, we've prepared for you a little bit of menti.com. And so we invite you, you can take like the QR code with your phone, or just go on www.menti.com and add the code there. And there is a little bit of of a survey we have prepared for you. And we would like to start from your experience. So let me show you what the survey is about. And I will share with you in a moment also the link directly in the chat box so you can click on it and go to the survey as well. You should be able to see the link in the chat box if you want to go to our survey. And if all goes according to the plans, which you never know with technology at some level, but this is the slide you should be able to see. So we wanted to start with inviting you to basically check in with us about some statements. If you can say these are some beliefs, and see what you think about those. Because often, Catherine, I don't know if you see it like this, but I think especially when we work in the field of leadership development and team coaching, our role is very, very much to bust some myths, right? And to work with...
That's true, and we all have a different experience as well of remote, working remotely. So we'd like to hear from you in terms of, how much do you agree of the following statements? Does virtual work enhances staff engagement? Does virtual work improves team productivity? Does virtual work has a positive impact on work-life balance? We keep hearing those statements quite a lot. So it would be good just to hear from you. What's your point of view? Leading in a virtual setting is easier than face-to-face. We're starting to see the results. So here, this is what we're noticing at the moment is we've got quite high scores on virtual work improves team productivity. Virtual works has a positive impact on work-life balance. Virtual teams require completely new skills of leaders. So we're going to wait until the poll is actually closed so we can actually give us a little bit of an understanding. But you can see that the most important one here, there are two: the positive impact on work-life balance, and it requires completely new skills of leaders, Andrea. Very interesting indeed.
I think it's also interesting that the answers are so distributed. So there seems to be quite a bit of difference in the way people...
Yes. There's one around the leading in a virtual setting is easier than face-to-face.
Yeah.
That seems to be the lowest score. And I understand that, especially for some of us, had to have an abrupt shift, haven't we, from actually working in offices and now working remotely due to the corona virus. So I completely understand that we're having to adapt still.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And at some level, I agree with the statements. It is a little bit more challenging leading in a virtual setting, and it is a little bit more challenging if you're a leader to create that sense of trust and intimacy in a virtual setup. But I would like to give my perspective because Catherine and I have been thinking about this a lot, but there's been a lot of conversation in the last months about working virtually is completely different. If you need to lead a virtual team, there are completely new stuff that you need to learn. And actually, I think we'd like to make the point that this is not true, or not entirely true at least. You need very similar skills compared to the ones that a good leader and a good people engager and a good people developer and a good people coach already has when they're at work. And the challenge is if you don't have some basic in the face-to-face setup, it's gonna be much more challenging to perform well in a virtual environment. So the impact of some poor behaviors is just gonna be multiplied. And I think this is what we all experience, in working virtually in these days. So what we hope to show you is that if you start from some basics, make the translation into the virtual world, it's going to be so much simplified for you. Catherine, anything else you want to say to comment the
No, I think that's it. I mean, you're absolutely right. I do like the scoring. Again, the lowest score is the one that it is sometimes not as easy as we think, and it's probably due to the fact that it has been for some of us an abrupt shift, for a transition, if you want, and that makes complete sense. So why don't we just move on then, Andrea, and just remind the different objectives of what are the objectives that we have for our lovely participants today.
Yeah. So, because we just have 1 hour, we would like to see with you actually what the opportunities are for teams and leaders in a virtual setting, but also explore what are some of the key challenges. Let's see if we can identify the most common, and share with you some key principles to size opportunities and minimize risks. I mean, if we can accomplish these 3 things in 1 hour, I think it's going to be time well spent. And I hope
Absolutely, it would be awesome. Look at the benefits, the key challenges, and some key principles for seizing opportunities and minimizing risks. Thank you very much, Andrea. Maybe what we could do then is start by looking at the definition of what is a virtual team. So I'm going to take you through the common definition of what is a virtual team here, quoted on the left-hand side of your slide, but also I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the 4 key characteristics, if you want, of a virtual teams. So a virtual team is a group that, while not sharing the same operating location, works by leveraging digital technology to produce results, exchange information, and nurture relationships. And the key thing here is to look at the key dimensions. So the first one I'd like to convey with you is the digital tools. So new technology are released every day almost to keep people connected across cities, across countries, but also across oceans. So it's very important to know which digital tools, platform are we going to be using. There are some collaborative software to really have some immediate communication with your teams, but you've also got some audio and video conferencing, such as the Zoom that we are using at the moment, to keep us connected and work more collaboratively. But there's also other tools such as online project management tools, just to help us work more efficiently together. And very important. So digital tools. After the digital tools, the other key dimension of a virtual team is this geographical distribution of workplaces. And it's important that we say this because it's obviously completely makes sense. But in virtual teams, people can really work practically anywhere and anytime. And I know Andrea is going to smile when I mention this, but I'm half French. Come in August, I can move very easily in the south of France if the customs are open. And it's so easy for us working in the virtual settings to do just that, we can work anywhere we can. The next dimension, of course, is not just about digital tools and the geographical distribution, but it's punctual communication. So this is about establishing some communication habits, some powerful communication habits. There are no more informal communication in a virtual settings. Do you remember in those offices that we used to have, and you would have a coffee, a quick chit chat over coffee at the coffee machine in your buildings? Well, there's no such thing in a virtual team setting. So we need to be aware and mindful of that, and to really establish some powerful communication habits. So we don't disconnect with our people. We don't disconnect with the people that we are leading in a virtual remote. But of course, also, and I did allude to this, we do have little interaction outside work. It's not so easy to have a physical drink in a bar, in a restaurant at the end of a very busy day. So again, it's really about being prepared to build a sense of community, where teams can really, and managers can really get together from a personal note and start to really kind of mingle and establish some really good connections and relationships. So it's really important that we communicate these 4 key dimensions, if you want, of a virtual teams before we can actually talk about the benefits. Let's have a look at the benefits very quickly, Andrea. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to elaborate because we know the benefits, but I just wanted to highlight the 4 key benefits that Andrea and I would like to share with you today. So the first one is to maximize the use of resources and reduce costs. So we all know that one of the biggest advantage from a virtual, it saves time and money on traveling cost, on also commuting, and possibly maybe on building cost itself as well. So it does maximize the use of resources and reduce cost. And I'm going to be brave and say something to you. It does also limit interruptions when you're working from home. You can just sit down and carry on with your work. Now, I say I'm going to be brave because at the moment, I can hear my kids, I don't know if you can, downstairs doing a semblance of a school learning. So I know at the moment in this period of crisis, we have to all be a bit more adaptable and flexible. But when the schools open in the UK, I will definitely maximize the use of my resources as well when I work. So it really provides a lot of benefits on that front. The second benefit is to have access to global expertise. I mean, it's just so easy to tap into subject matters experts, no matter where they are in the world, no matter where they are across oceans. But it's also very easy to have the ability to draw talent and to bring some of the talent into our teams. And this is exactly what we do within TPC, because we are virtual. We can actually tap into all our partners around the world to really share knowledge and skills together and learn from each other. The third one I wanted to share with you is, of course, the technology. Is to use the technology to not only facilitate, but just to make sure it's there to support the management of team dynamics. So as I alluded to you earlier on, it's really knowing which of the technology will benefit the best for you and your teams. And on the last point I want to share with you the benefits is to leverage smart working to maximize engagement. If done well, it has a better work-life balance, doesn't it? If work well, it does have a better work, but it really is about knowing how to best smart working to maximize engagement. And for my clients and things that we do as well at TPC, here's a brilliant example. What we're currently doing is we call it rotating leadership. It's something you probably are doing already. In some of your key meetings, such as our monthly management meetings, we rotate our leadership so we can actually have ownership of each one of us, each of the partners, to take ownership of that meeting and to really take full responsibility of the different actions. And this really does help maximize engagement in your team. We are going to share with you some best practices later on, but it's really just important just to pause and look at the benefits. It's great, isn't it, Andrea, to talk about benefits, but of course we know there are some challenges as well, isn't there, Andrea?
Yes.
Oh, before we go, probably, yes, thank you very much for reminding me this. This is from the US Census Bureau. Just have a look. This is very recent information. Have a look what people are saying as well in terms of what's their benefits for working remotely. Their top benefits for them is flexible scheduling, working from any location, and no commuting. These are the top benefits for them to actually working remotely. But here's the thing, 98%, if you see in the middle of your slide, 98% would like to work remotely at least some of the time for the rest of their careers. It's quite an interesting stat, isn't it, Andrea?
Yeah, it's super interesting because it feels really like something that we want in this period. Now, we've been forced in this period, but I think that we all have experienced the benefits of it. And so, of course, I'm aware that not all virtual teams are, smart working teams, because often, sometimes virtual teams are just people in different locations, but sitting in different offices. But what's happening is that actually we're putting together virtual work with smart working, and this seems to have a very, very high positive impact on engagement and work-life balance for people. But of course, like you were saying, there are some significant challenges, and we don't want to skip over those. Actually, we have prepared another little question for you on menti.com. So please go back to your menti.com as I enable the new page for you. Okay. So the question is, what are the main challenges you personally experience in leading virtual teams, or in working in virtual teams? Because we would like to hear more about that. And you have the possibility, I think, to write 3 times, maximum 3 ideas. My invitation is just to use keywords and stay short, so that that comes nicer on the
screen.
On the screen, yes.
So what are some of your challenges?
Maybe I don't want to prime the conversation too much, as you guys write, but I definitely, one of the challenges I'm experiencing is the difficulty of putting, clear boundaries between the working and non-working time. I guess, many of my clients have experienced these too. That's a big one. I think it's a big one for team members, and it sometimes is a very, very big one for team leaders too.
Yes, and there's a bit of a blur from professional life and personal life. So let's have a look now what you've actually said.
Yeah. Okay. Answers are coming. Yeah, monitor stress. I like that. A little bit of monitor fatigue. No boundaries.
Keeping up the enthusiasm, Andrea.
Keep up the enthusiasm, yes.
Not always easy, I understand.
Not always easy, especially when you're leading many Zoom meetings over a day. I know this, for example, that, we do lots of team coaching or team facilitation. And so we used to run one-day workshops with our clients. And at some level, it was intense, but quite easy, because then you have some relaxing time during the day. But now that we're doing, for example, virtual team coaching, virtual facilitation, then it's impossible to be 8 hours in front of the computer. And so you need to find different and more creative ways to work with that. Let's see what else is coming. I like the deep emotional behavior in the center, because that's a bit of a question mark, isn't it, for us? It's about how we engage with our emotions in a framework that doesn't allow us, for example, to read the nonverbal, or where informal communication is so limited. So do we really have a sense of there's a real feeling?
I quite like as well. Oh, it's gone. It was something about involving everyone. And that's something that from running in the UK branch is very important to me. And absolutely, whoever wrote this, I completely sympathize and understand. And it's really about reminding ourselves that we all have different traits, personality traits, and some of us are extroverts. So we think and say, so we wouldn't hesitate to actually participate and say, but some of us are introverts, and we need to allow time to think before we can actually say. So that kind of helps me sometimes just to pause a little bit and give some silence and pauses, so I can make sure that more people are engaged. But I do understand that could be a challenge sometimes.
Yeah. Even even the physical dimension, when it's much more difficult to metabolize stress when you don't move so much. And so not necessarily working in a virtual environment takes you to move less. But then if you put together what we're experiencing in these days, which is social distancing plus virtual work, or if you don't, even if in a normal situation, if you don't monitor well the screen time versus the non-screen time, then it becomes even physically challenging. Yeah.
But the two key words here are harder to engage and stress. That seems to be highlighted quite a bit, Andrea.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I see lots of stress, emotions, engagement. Yeah, there is also someone said, less productive, which I am curious about, because it actually can, in order for someone to be productive, it takes something that we're going to talk about in a moment for someone to be more productive in working in virtual teams. But it is true that if you don't have that, your productivity can be hindered. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for some of these inputs, which are really interesting. Let me share with you also what are a little bit of numbers about what are the most common concerns of managers, the biggest concerns. And I think it's very interesting that many managers are concerned about the reduced employee focus in working virtually and the productivity or the cohesiveness. The idea of, how can we maintain a team culture or a company culture? What will be the implications for my people? But also, how do I manage if someone is overworking? If I need to give you my perspective, in order to turn these challenges into opportunities, you really need to look into some very specific areas when it comes to team management in a virtual setting, isn't it? And let me show you, maybe from our perspective, what these areas are. Because I think one very important element is what's the composition of your team. So we need to be honest. I think, Catherine, also in our experience, not everyone operates well in a virtual setup. So you need to be, I would say, happy enough to manage yourself. And so there needs to be a little bit of self-management skill from that perspective. Also, you need to be happy to be flexible, happy to adapt, happy to work with different technologies. And not everyone is happy, not to have a routine in the office or see their colleagues every day in a face-to-face. So it requires a little bit of a personality style. And this is very, very important in the way you compose your team. I'm talking about team members, but that's true also for team leaders.
Yes.
Yeah, they need to be good in working in that environment and understanding what's needed. The second element is, while by far and large we all know how the traditional communication system by speaking and writing work, there needs to be some regulation in the way you communicate through technologies. I told Catherine, my mother has 6 brothers and sisters, so only that WhatsApp takes big part of that of my WhatsApp. If I start adding on WhatsApp all the stuff from clients and colleagues that actually should go on email, then my life becomes very, very difficult, and I may not meet their expectations. And I need to tell you, this is a real challenge in my own team here, especially when I work with millennials or young men and women from newer generations, which are much more used to work, with social media and WhatsApp, even to drive forward work stuff. So it's about how we contract about these things and how we regulate about those elements. And I've only quoted email and WhatsApp, but then if you start adding Slack, if you start adding the company social media, Teams, and then the storage system and the Google Drive or the Dropbox, whatever you use, that's going to require some regulation. The other very important element is also how you develop performance, because if people are not there, you need to be really good at helping them to get there and being a good people developer. Of course, ideally, you can choose the composition of your team, but we know this is not always possible. And so it's about how you are able to facilitate not only skills development, but also some transition in terms of mindset. Sometimes even helping someone to restructure some negative or limiting beliefs about the virtual working. And finally, I think you all mentioned this one, it's about how you build trust and intimacy in the team. Because new or different, probably not new emotions, but old emotions are somehow sparked differently in a virtual setup. And maybe if we have a bit of time in the end, we're going to talk about that too. Okay.
So we wonder, what kind of skills do we need? Do we still need some old skills that we are currently using or we have used, or do we need some new skills to really focus on process, relationship and development, like Andrea was talking about? So I just wanted to share with you our line of thinking. So we're going to start from a virtual team leader point of view. So from a leader point of view, and then we'll talk about from a team member point of view. So from a leader point of view, some of the traditional leadership skills are still needed, such as developing, creating smart objectives. We still absolutely need to be very clear on smart objectives, but also setting some expectations and ground rules in terms of how we're going to work together. So these traditional leadership skills are definitely, most importantly, needed. But something new that seems to be emerging is about facilitating meetings in a virtual settings. And we talk about making sure that people are engaged, like you've actually talked about. Some of the challenges is how to keep them engaged and constantly keep them engaged, knowing that you can do many things on Zoom, can't you? You can switch your video and actually maybe just go and text on your phone and work on this other deadline that you're working on. So really how to keep them engaged. We have to know how to facilitate that. We also know how to use this new technology platform that Andrea was talking about regulating. So now it's regulated. How do we use it to its full advantage? But the biggest change, we believe, from a virtual team leader point of view, is to have this enabler mindset. It's not just about content anymore. It's really about enabling the relationships, developing the relationships. It's about enabling the dynamics between the teams, making sure every voices are heard. It's really about enabling the processes, the meeting processes, etc., etc. So it's really about this enabling mindset that a virtual team leader has to have. From a team member point of view, Andrea alluded to this self-management earlier on. This is so important as well, just to feel responsible, to be self-motivated in this virtual setting is very important from a team member point of view. And really what is the glue, if you want, what sticks between this enabler mindset and this self-manager mindset from a leader, but also from a team member point of view, is the contracting piece. It's about the ways of working, the contracting piece that we can actually, both of us, from a leader, but also from a team point of view, obey and kind of work together on it. And Andrea is going to explain to us how we can do that. Aren't you, Andrea?
Yes. So the idea is very much to look into the hard side of teamwork, because what usually happens is that we focus very much in getting along together, having good relationships, checking in with each other, and in the hope that this way we can avoid conflicts in a team. But actually what happens is that some of the fundamental pillars of a team are not synchronized, and then this sparks conflicts because we don't have understanding on the basic way of functioning. It's a little bit like if in those movies of James Bond movies, they would start a mission without synchronizing the clocks. That would be a mess. The reality is that as team leaders, we all do this, so we go a little bit empirically rather than contracting about some of these core dimensions. Now, these core dimensions, which I'm about to show you, are not by themselves typical of virtual teams. They apply somehow to all teams, it's the hard side of all teams, but some of these dimensions are particularly important when we come to virtual team dynamics. The first one is the C, is the common vision. And here the idea is the team vision compelling and clear enough to drive the right behaviors? Is it clear why we need the team and why we are interdependent to achieve some common goals? This is very, very important because that's where the energy comes from in a team. And very often technologies can distract us from having purpose-oriented or mission-oriented conversations. And we can easily lose track of the big picture, especially when our work style is very fragmented and we quickly move from one meeting to another. So this is very important that leaders keep on reinforcing this dimension. I think all of us have been doing experience of what happens when the dimension is not there. The second dimension is the leadership culture in the team, starting from the style of the leader. It's for example, traditional direct and controlled style doesn't really work in a virtual environment because you just had no chance to do it. So like Catherine was saying, how much are you capable of being an enabler? how much can you focus not only on the content, but for example, on the process, the relationships in the team, the dynamics in the team, so that you can enable self-management in the people you work with. But of course, it's also leadership culture from the team members too, because if you want to have self-managers on the other side, there needs to be some personal leadership in the way they lead themselves, but also they lead the team together with the formal team leader. And the third dimension is the organizational setting. And this is more about what's the structure, what are the decision rights, what are the roles and responsibilities. So of course, in a setup where it's not easy to meet face-to-face every time, or to have meetings where we all can have long conversations to agree on things, it's very, very important that who's accountable, who's responsible for decisions is cleared upfront, so that in an ideal world, single individuals know exactly what they can make decisions on to drive things forward. And you don't need to lead by committee for all kind of decisions. The other very important element is the communication guidelines. I think here I go back again to what I said before. And the way it's not only the technologies you use, but how you contract about how the technologies you use, which is very, very important. This, of course, requires some upskilling, but it requires much more negotiating. What's the netiquette for each one of the technologies we're using? Because there are implications related to the privacy of people, the confidentiality of materials. There are also implications related, for example, to, this is also well-being, how engaging team meetings are when they are in a virtual setup, because usually we have many of those. And can we make sure that we only have the ones who are really needed, that the length of these meetings is really what we need, but also that whoever is running them has a little bit of facilitation skills in a virtual setting, so we don't do that by PowerPoint in a virtual environment. I think knowledge and skills, the main difference here is if we are technologically savvy enough, and if we have enough self-management to work in this virtual setup. And the last element, which is the stakeholders management strategy of the team, I would say, again, this is very important in general, but it has a very specific dimension when you work virtually. Because especially where you don't have the chance to meet people at lunch or face-to-face or more informally, the stakeholders which are a bit further from the team are more difficult to make, to be contacted. And so what often happens when we're working virtually is that the burden of managing stakeholders around the team falls on the shoulders of the team leader. But because the team leader has Zoom calls booked back-to-back all day, it's easy that, the most difficult to make contact with, they get pushed further in time. So I think in an ideal working environment virtually, there is good conversation about who manages whom and how, so that you can make sure that no one of the key stakeholders is left unseen. I would say that these are the main dimensions. Catherine, did I forget any important element of this?
No, I really liked it. I just had a thought about the knowledge and skills, and something that we do is we call it peer coaching, peer-to-peer coaching. So really just to enable our team members just to learn new skills and to keep up with their growth. What we do is we put them in pairs, in buddies, just to learn from each other from some skills. Yeah. And it's actually it has been very useful, just something that resonated to me. But no, this is a great way of synchronizing your team, isn't it? Just by using clocks, and a great way to remember.
Yeah, there's a bit of a memorizing strategy. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be easy to explore maybe one of those dimensions a bit more in detail, what happens. So we have prepared another Mentimeter question for you, which we are going to enable in a second. And it's this one. Consider your virtual team. It can be the team that you're leading or the team that you are working in. And consider how much, for example, vision, purpose, and goals are compelling and clear, or the team leader operates as an enabler and a coach, and so on. So these are the different dimensions. And give us your score. And then we'll make some considerations about what happens when some of these elements are not clear or effectively positioned in the team. So open again your Mentimeter from the link.
It's the same code.
Same code. Let us know what you think. Okay, first answers are arriving. Maybe as the answers are arriving, Catherine, I'm thinking I'd like to say a couple of things about the vision and purpose dimension. Because I work with many organizations, you know, in the third sector, NGO, international organizations, where often, you know, people are attracted because of, you know, the purpose of the work they can do, the inspiration and the impact which comes from it. And, you know, every time the level of stress starts, you know, raising, and the, can I say that the speed of change starts increasing, it's so easy for them, like for all of us, to lose the big picture and why we're actually doing what we're doing. And I think especially where you're not, you know, in that same building every day, you don't breathe the same air. Maybe you don't feel that physically connected like you usually do. This can be one of the dimensions which needs to be energized and re-energized.
Especially at the moment, Andrea, simply because no doubt some of your team members are probably just wondering, has the purpose changed?
Yes.
You know, has our goals changed because of what's happened? Yeah. Are we focusing on something new that we're not aware of? So I agree with you, Andrea. Vision, purpose, and goals must be compelling and clear for the teams.
It's also I've experienced, you know, same teams, but often when people are very purpose oriented and the goal is so inspiring that in a virtual setup there is really the risk of overworking. So there is a, you know, a very, very high level of engagement also as a dark side, which is then it's difficult to switch off for some people or just to take care of yourself. And so again, this is important to be balanced with a thorough understanding of the capacity to manage yourself, even from a well-being and a health perspective, and an appropriate work-life balance.
So something I just wanted to point out, the meetings are engaging and communication is effective. So we've got currently a score of 7.4, Andrea. And I just wanted to share sometimes just what I do, and I know some of my clients do, is they just do a pulse check with their team. It's just nice sometimes just to do a pulse check. There's different ways you can do it. Yeah, for those who like a bit more of a formal way, you can do a survey, or you could just do some check-ins in your teams like we do within TPC, just check-ins. How's it going so far? What else do you need? And where are we going? So it's really good, you know, to stay up front with some check-ins with your teams, just to make sure that we are still making sure that they're engaged.
Yeah. And of course, I cannot fail to notice that, you know, the lowest score is the stakeholders management plan, and this reflects my experience as a team coach as well. Often that's one of the weakest parts, and it's one that we tend to overlook or to assign just to the team leader, and it's such a pity at some level, because a team which is well integrated into its system and a network of teams operating with that level of understanding and the level of clarity in the way they manage each other and they manage different stakeholders is really what modern companies need. And as our work become more and more agile and flexible, we're going to need these highly skilled teams, not only on the field of delivering the work, but also of leading beyond hierarchies and beyond the traditional
Absolutely.
top-down or input and output.
I so agree with you, Andrea. That's why I love working with you, because we think the same. And it's very important to focus in terms of stakeholders. Who are your key stakeholders? And like Andrea was alluding earlier on, probably some of you are spending a lot of time on calls yourselves, on Zoom after Zoom. So it's really important to establish the list of your key stakeholders and just give a little bit of empowerment for some of your team members who might be able to help you. Absolutely. Empowering teams at the moment is really important, isn't it? Just to help them stay engaged, isn't it, Andrea?
Yeah, Catherine, I'm thinking also at some level, you know, when this empowerment is lacking, you know, what emotions get sparkled? Because you know, we had this point of emotions in the beginning, and so, you know, now we know from brain science that there are some dimensions which are particularly important to satisfy for our brain not to be engaged in a stress reaction, not to go in fight or flight. And at some level, my experience is that, you know, with the teams I work with, especially in this period, but not only this period, anxiety, which is an expression of fear, is one of the most common. It's one of the most common emotions to experience. And then anxiety usually leads to, from the leader's side, to looking for more control, and then reducing, you know, the spaces of responsibility and autonomy of team members. And we all know how we feel when the space for autonomy is not recognized, or, for example, our seniority or expertise or status is not recognized. What we'll start doing is we'll start disengaging. Rather than engaging in meaningful conversations, we'll just start doing what we're told with minimum level of effort. And then the dynamic is just that we start delegating upwards all the complex thinking, just because when we do complex thinking, that's not appreciated enough, and we feel controlled and micromanaged. I think it's a very common dynamic that I have experienced. And I think it would be important to raise some more awareness of, when we don't meet face to face, how easy it is to go into that spiral. I don't know if you experience the same with the teams you're working, Catherine.
Yes, I do understand that, but interesting. When you look at the score here, Andrea, we've got 8.1. The team leader operates as an enabler and a coach.
That's quite amazing.
So it is absolutely amazing. So you are already doing that. You already are focusing on this enabler mindset and coach, which is so needed at the moment. I mean, one of the key things that we should be doing is take care of our people, right? Like you were saying, there is a lot of anxiety of people. People maybe in the UK are being furloughed. So it's really about taking care of the people. It's about taking care of the future, but also, of course, taking care of your stakeholders. Absolutely. Yes. So shall we move on to the next slide? Just conscious of time, and we'd like to hear some of your questions. So let's do a quick recap. Thank you, Andrea, on the key learnings from today that we wanted to share with you from leading virtual teams. One is virtual team management requires strong leadership skills as coach and enabler. And it's a great thing, the fact that we all know this in this mini workshop. All the participants know this, and you seem to be doing this very well. But it's about empowering and making sure that your team members are self-managing. That's really the key word I wanted to share with you. The second point, it's around this contracting skill set. Leverage your contracting skill set. Not just about the content, but about the approach in terms of how we're going to work together. Make the implicit explicit to be able to generate this trust within the team. I know that a few years back, maybe companies weren't sure about making sure that their team were going to work remotely, maybe because of a lack of trust. Well, guess what? It works. It does work. But you need to leverage your contracting skills and ways of working to generate the trust and the clarity and focus. And Clocks does help you do that. It helps us do that, to focus on those dimensions. And the third point, it's really focusing on relationships. The key especially at the moment, is on the people and development to encourage self-management. So really it is about leadership skills as a coach, as an enabler. It's about contracting, and really it is about doing everything you can to make sure that people self-manage. Have we got time for one or two questions?
I think we got actually.
Let's do
say,
that. So
yeah.
yes, go on, Andrea.
Chat box, what do you think?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
Yes, we have time. We have time. So fantastic. So can I invite you, if you have any questions, please to write it on the chat, and Andrea and I will do everything we can to answer. We might not be able to answer all of your questions, but keep them coming and we'll start.
Or even any contribution, kind of like things that you believe is important and maybe we haven't mentioned. How big can be a virtual team? This is a great question. Catherine, you want to answer?
How big a virtual team can be? Well, it's a very good point, actually. I'm not sure I've got the answer for that. I don't think as large as you can think, Carol, simply because it makes it very difficult to really hear every voices heard. I don't particularly want to put a number on it. But I do know that you can't really work in the large virtual team settings. What do you think, Andrea?
No, I'm aligned with you. I think literature usually said that a rule of thumb is like 7 plus or minus 2. It's a good number for a team. I've been working with team with 12 people, but I would say this is really the maximum, because then it becomes impossible really to engage everyone, and then it becomes something else. You start creating sub teams at that point. I have another question from Emiliano. He says, hi, according to your experience and studies, how is optimal time balance between time spent in office and remotely? Catherine, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question, isn't it? This is just assuming that we will go back to the office, right? I'm just kidding. Yeah, so how is optimal time balance between time spent in office and remotely? Let me do this. I would like to hear from other participants what they think is this optimum time balance between time spent in office and remotely. We all have different views. We all have different ways of actually managing and leading. So what are your views on this? How would you do this? So according to your experience and studies, how is optimal time balance between time spent in office and remotely? I mean, in our virtual settings at TPC, we don't spend any time in offices because it's all virtual. And Carol, you're very welcome. So here we go. We've got Erika, example on working around managing team members who usually are engaging more based on a personal and face-to-face.
And this is interesting. Maybe this connects with what Emiliano asked as well. So it is a very personal answer, because I know people that only want to do smart working because they want to be able to work from the seaside if they want, or to move from town to town. And I know people living like that. Maybe because they have an interest in a specific sport or in traveling, and they are only happy in that setup, or because they want to be closer to their families. And then they only work, face to face when it comes to some big meetings or events. And I know other people that needs the regular face-to-face work. My experience, most of the people is happy with around the 50-50. That's what I hear, but it's a rule of thumb, and I think it's
a rule of thumb. No, and that's why it's difficult to answer, Emiliano, because it depends on your role as well. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here. If you're in construction, for example, working on the site, you've got to be there 100%. Yeah. So it really does depend on your role, and it does depend on your commute as well.
Yeah.
So here we've got depends on the nature of work, maturity and needs of team and stage of project, in my view, maybe 80% remotely. And this is from TPC Global. Yeah. And then Carol is saying, I feel that time together then must be used to build and reinforce team spirit and engagement. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's essential at the moment. Absolutely, in the virtual settings.
And I'd like to go back to Erica's request for an example of working around, team members who are not engaged in working virtually. I don't know if you have any. I think I have one.
Tell me yours and I'll just share mine.
Yeah. So I think it happened to me some years ago with a colleague that was used much more to a face-to-face environment. So coming more from big company, corporate backgrounds. And so it was a little bit more about the age, more about the experience. but it was difficult to have, snap conversations. Then that's what you do, that's what I do, and then move on to the next thing. And I remember having conversations about, or actually being able to spot some signs of distress when we couldn't meet face to face or with the team for a longer time. So as a manager, I had to learn to notice those signals, because if I wasn't noticing them, they were then translating into conflicts at work, or conflicts with me, or errors or problems in work. So I had to learn to recognize those needs and meet them early on. Catherine, I don't know if you have an example.
I can't help but think, what's in it for me syndrome. Always think about the benefits. Always think about the benefits of what this managing team members virtually might be for them. So if they know some of their benefits, then it would create trust and much more giving in terms of doing more virtual. But I am completely understand, Erica, that some of us prefer more of a personal and face-to-face to really get this intimacy that we need in building relationships. But you can do it on a virtual settings. You absolutely can. And it's really, maybe from a leader point of view, is showing your own vulnerability as well, showing your personal note, something that you would like to share about yourself. And then the more you do that, the more your team members will do that as well. And it creates this intimacy in a virtual settings. So it's always think about the benefits of what it could be for them, what's in it for them.
Yeah, I agree with you. And probably maybe this is a last thing I'd like to say before we wrap it up. But I also think it's, in a virtual setting in particular, is important to talk also about how people feel. Because it's easy to, I think it's, especially if you come from the kind of background I come from, very cognitive background. I have a degree in academic degree in philosophy, so very cognitive stuff, and a traditional, be strong management style. Emotions is personal stuff. You don't bring them at work. And actually, in a virtual setup, emotions build up and you may not notice. And then those things become a business problem. So having the habit, or developing the habit, of checking in with people in an authentic and meaningful way about how they are, but I would say even more, you sharing how you are, you demonstrating it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to have up and downs, because this is the human condition.
Indeed.
And without letting go yourself to your emotions, but still managing yourself, good role model of self-regulation. That's being able to have that conversation.
And I like what Warren was saying, and I do hope I'm spelling your name correctly, Warren, and I do apologize if I haven't, but I think it depends on the field of work, but working remotely can give us additional skill that we can apply. And we alluded to the millennials. Andrea was talking about millennials. You know how important it is for them to continue to grow and learn. So you're absolutely right, Warren. It really does give us some additional skills that we can learn from it.
Yeah. Work is not only about work. It's really about, contacts and relationship among all of us, and why we do the work we do.
I like Carol saying, what is your weather conditions today?
Great.
Brilliant.
Brilliant way of doing that. Yes, Carol. Yes.
Indeed. Shall we do our key takeaway then? Great.
Okay, so I have prepared for you a final Mentimeter question, which I'm going to share in a moment.
Because whilst he's sharing, Andrea, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you today, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear those key takeaways that you have from this this conversation. We've tried to make it as engaging and participative as we can in a mini workshop settings on Zoom. But this is 3 words we want to hear from you describing your experience of this webinar, this mini workshop. So what are the 3 words that you would like to share with us, describing your experience today with us? And again, it's the same code, Mentimeter. I quite like this Mentimeter, Andrea.
It's not bad. Yeah. I think when you have bigger numbers and you don't have much more of a chance to have a real conversation, it's a nice way to keep dialogue going.
It is indeed, and it's something new. It's something you probably already are using it in this audience, but it is something new. So look what we've got here. We've got insightful, we've got connected, uplifting. My gosh, this is so positive. I love this. Inspiring, future is coming. Wish had seen it earlier. It's never too late, whoever wrote that. It's never too late. We can learn every single day, no matter how much we've got in our brain and our experiences. I'm a firm believer that it's never too late. Inspiring, again, that key word. I guess if it's a key word, if it's bigger, does that mean everybody's using it, Andrea? A lot of people are saying it. Okay, right. Thank you for letting us know. So tips and tricks, thank you. The one world, absolutely. It's this one universe that we're all in this together, connected. Uplifting, we said that, to the point. Good, I like that. That's kind of something to do with my personality trait, so it does make a lot of sense to me. Look at Andrea, we work very well together, by the way. You can see this, can't you? Reflection time, very important, to always pause and get this extra time of clarity. Yes, it is international, it is. We're all in this together, aren't we? We're all in this together, Andrea.
Yeah, and this will be more and more part of our life. So again, an invitation of how we work and make things happen, but also how we take care of each other as we do that.
So true.
Yeah.
So Andrea, why don't you tell us the last few words before we end this mini workshop?
Yeah, probably. I'd say probably what I just said. Probably it's my own personal takeaway. Kind of like reinforcing how important it is that as we do what matters to us, we look after ourselves and the people which are on the journey with us. Because especially in times of crisis, and especially for people really wanting to make a difference to others in the way we do, we can be very, very goal driven. And actually, I think it's a good reminder to be very careful and aware on how we exploit even our own personal resources.
Absolutely.
What about you, Catherine?
I wanted to share something. I know we're not supposed to, but I am, because I'm full of generosity from the words that you've just described. A brilliant book, not very big, by Edgar Schein, The Humble Leadership. If you have got time, have a look at it. It's very inspiring. And I keep looking at your beautiful words that you've said, and it's incredibly, truly inspiring. So Humble Leadership by Edgar Schein, if you have got a moment to buy it on Amazon. And it is incredibly inspiring. So listen, thank you so much for your time with us today. It's been an absolute joy to work with Andrea and share some of our tips and to hear some of yours. And we'll leave it as that, Andrea.
I would say so. Just an invitation. I mean, if you want to keep on having the conversation, we are really passionate about teams and this new world which is opening its door to us. So keep on making contact with us on LinkedIn, and we can keep on having the conversation. So
that's right. And thank you, Warren, for your comment in the chat. Now, we have got some other series of mini workshops coming your way. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, all of you.
Goodbye.